How many of you are not here for the social engineering talk and are just here? That's it? One truthful person? How many of you are just here for this talk so you can get the code that's not in this talk? One, really? Two? There's a code that is definitely not in this talk. We're going to talk about that in this talk. That is really bright, my goodness. No, I will not, but I will do my best to help you understand that the code is not in my talk. Are we all ready to get started? Okay, so I'm going to be showing a couple videos here. We're going to try and work out the sound. We might need to replay them to get them up to speed, but we've got sound ready, so we're going to do our best. So my name is Seth. I'm a member of the Utah Saint organization and part of the SAINTCON committee. I got voluntold to do this talk, and I'm excited to give it. I hope that you're excited to hear it. I hope that it helps you. This is going to be slightly more red team than the talks that I have given before on social engineering, less about defense and more about just getting what you want to have happen. So these are some social engineering tactics that I want to talk about. To start out, I want to give a couple of disclaimers. The first one is the things that I'm going to teach you can be used to break the law. Don't. If you think that you'd like to use these things, I recommend that you find some competent legal advice. I could pretend like I'm competent legal advice, and as a social engineer, I can probably get you to believe that I'm competent legal advice, but also as a social engineer, don't. That's a terrible idea. Please don't use this information for anything to break the law. Disclaimer number 2, there is absolutely not a Hacker's Challenge answer in this presentation. You'll probably be required to listen very carefully to know for sure that there is not a Hacker's Challenge answer in this presentation. You might need to get some team members together to figure out who's going to be listening during which sections and make sure you get them all. If you happen to notice that there isn't a Hacker's Challenge answer in this presentation at any point during this presentation, raise your hand so that everyone knows that you figured it out so they can come to you later and maybe get some help with that. And if you happen to figure out the Hacker's Challenge answer that is not in this presentation, it consists entirely of lowercase letters. No spaces, words. Is that clear enough? No? Okay, it will become clear in the future, maybe, I think. Disclaimer number 3, you agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement by continuing to read, listen to, participate in, interact with, or view this presentation. You agree to delete, remove, and erase any and all written, video, audio, and photographic recordings or images of this presentation. Thank you for agreeing to my EULA. Yeah, over here. We'll just delete it later, I'll tell Pope. All right, disclaimer number 4. This talk contains social engineering. I am the social engineer, you are the target. Yes. Disclaimer number 5. If you haven't figured it out, I started a while ago. All right, let's get into it. So, I want to start out with story time. When I give talks about social engineering, I love to talk about social engineering experiments, things that I have done. Today I want to do something a little bit different and mix it up. I want to share some of the experiments that I have done, and I also want to share some experiments in social engineering that have been done to me. A lot of people think that once you know about social engineering, you get a lot of training and education, that you're suddenly immune to social engineering. I've been studying social engineering for a long time. I've been giving talks on social engineering here at SAINTCON and at other conferences for, I don't know, the better part of 5 years. It happens to me too, and we're going to talk about that right now. So, the first social engineering event that I want to talk about is one where I was the subject, I was the target of social engineering, and it happens to be it occurred at a home improvement store that shall remain nameless. My buddy and I, we were hanging out one night, and he wanted to get something at a home improvement store, and I needed to get a device to help me with my Christmas lights. I don't know about you, but it drives me crazy that I have Christmas lights on when it's light outside. It's just a waste, right? Nobody can even tell they're on, but you're just throwing that power away. So to reduce my carbon footprint and make the world a better place, I decided to go to a home improvement store that shall remain nameless with my best friend to get a little device to plug in that automatically detects the darkness outside and will flip a switch to turn my Christmas lights on or off. And I should have known it was a bad idea to do that or to bring my friend with me. I don't generally go shopping with friends. I usually go with my wife because I have to. But in this particular case, we were just hanging out, whatever. We go to the home improvement store that shall remain nameless. And the item that we need is actually in the back of the store and all the way to the right. So you walk all the way in, you walk all the way to the back. And when I get to this area of the store, there's a gentleman there who has 2 giant dogs, like husky-sized dogs with him, which is weird, right? Maybe that's not weird for all of you, but for most of you, the normal people, that's weird, right? You bring your dogs to the store, kind of crazy. And this gentleman is essentially what I call holding hostage a member of the staff of this store that shall remain nameless. And that is, this person's job is to sit there and help you with whatever you ask. And if you are still engaging them in conversation, they really can't walk away. It's their job to listen to you. So this crazy guy with the 2 dogs is talking to a staff employee. And as I walk up, he looks at me funny, and I should have known something was wrong. He turns around, stops mid-conversation with this person, looks at me, points to me with a very forceful gesture and says, "It was you. You shot that guy in a gang fight in Park City." And my reaction was this. I had no idea what to do. All right, so next story. A week ago, I don't know how many of you know Chunk. This is a picture of Chunk. He's one of the committee members for the Utah Saint organization. And he's in charge of... Hello? He's in charge of speakers. Yes, I'm here. Last Thursday, I'm sitting at work, and I get a text message from Chunk. And he says, "Hey, Seth, we had a speaker drop out for one of these things. I'd like you to give a 4-hour workshop presentation. It's happening tomorrow if you want to come. We're going to talk about privacy." Next story. I guess the sign gets cut off. This is a story that I've told before. This is one that I did as social engineering. I used to work for a local company, and, well, I do now as well, but I was working for a local company that also shall remain nameless, and I was bored one day and found a piece of metal ductwork, the 8-inch round pipes that you use for ventilation in the office. And I decided that it would be interesting to see what would happen if I printed out on the office printer in just regular black ink a sign that says, "Do not move, thanks, management." Taped it on there, stuck it in the middle of the hallway, just to watch, see what would happen. Next story, same job, also very bored. I found a box of push pins sitting on my desk, and I don't know what you do with push pins, but when you're in a tech job, push pins are kind of useless. So it's a little plastic box. It has a little, lift lid. I decided to lift the lid up and just go walk around to people and stand in front of them and hold that out and see what happens. All right, so now that we've got story time set up, let's talk about social engineering. Let's get started. One of the first things that you need in social engineering is rapport, and oftentimes we talk about rapport as the ability to be likable. How many of you are liking me right now? All right, thank you. Usually that's a really hard one. How many of you are morally opposed to raising your hands? Lots of you also. Okay, thank you. All right, so the great Tony Robbins describes rapport as a feeling of commonality. When you share something in common with someone or whatever. How many of you have had the experience where you're talking with someone about an idea or a place that you've been, and you may or may not know the person very well? I mean, it could be someone who you've just barely met or someone who's on stage, and as you're talking, you kind of understand what they're talking about, and you say, "Yeah, you're right," Have you ever felt like that? Do you know what that feels like? Of course you do, because you're feeling it right now. Rapport is very powerful, and as you use it, you become a more capable social engineer. The next thing that you need to be a capable social engineer is you must know your target. And unfortunately today, I don't get to know all whatever 100 of you on a personal basis, but you're welcome to come talk to me later and we can get to know each other so that we can do this better. But knowing everything that you can about your target is really important. And the more you know about your target, the better able you will be to do whatever social engineering tactics you want. Simply knowing more gives you more power. And I'd like to introduce to you today, and we're going to do a video, so coming right up here, the leader or the chief of the NSA Tailored Access Operations. This is the guy who leads like nation-state attacks for the NSA for us. So he gave a talk in 2016 in January at the Unix Enigma conference and talked about how they use this particular tactic in computing attacks, and I'm ready to go if you are.
Appreciate it. Thanks for the welcome. So as David introduced, I'm from Tailored Access Operations, and I will admit it is very strange, right, to be in that position up here on a stage in front of a group of people. It's not something often done. But I'm in a unique position in that we produce in TAO foreign intelligence for a wide range of missions to include advice to informing policymakers, protecting the nation's warfighters 24/7. And in that space, we're doing nation-state exploitation. And so my talk today is to tell you, as a nation-state exploiter, what can you do to defend yourself to make my life hard, right? So not many people will stand on the stage and have the perspective of an organization that does exploitation and to be able to talk to those elements that really would disrupt the nation-state hackers. So in that vein, I want you to think about if there's something you really, really want to protect, what do you have to do? So you'll hear a common theme throughout my talk. It'll boil down to a couple small things. The theme I want you to take away is if you really want to protect your network, you really have to know your network. You have to know the devices, the security technologies, and the things inside it. So why are we successful? We put the time in to know that network. We put the time in to know it better than the people who designed it and the people who are securing it. And that's the bottom line, and you'll kind of hear that woven throughout the talk.
All right, we back? There we go. Did you guys hear the video okay back there in the back? All right. So when we're talking about nation-state level attacks, we generally think that those are awesome, powerful attacks. The advice that he gave is very simply, they don't depend on 0 days or anything like that. They depend on knowing the systems better than the people who built them, better than the people who set them up, better than the people who are defending them. So I would suggest to you that the corollary for humans is that if you know the human mind better than the person who owns it, you're far more capable to pulling off a nation-state attack level sort of thing as a social engineer than other people. That's a tall order because understanding the human mind is way more complex than understanding your IIS server, but that's the way to do it. All right, next, observation. You've got to observe your particular subject like I'm observing you now, but you have to notice the little details, every little thing, every little thing. The more you know about them, the better you will be able to use your social engineering tactics and tools. Also, observation will probably help you to realize a lot of things that you might normally not, and it can be sometimes a very good idea to take notes. Some of you are taking notes now. I like that. That's great. It will probably help you in social engineering me later, so thank you. You need to observe what's going on with these people and what makes them tick. Also, knowing their habits How many of you drove exactly the same way here and parked in maybe the same parking spot? Well, maybe not the same parking spot because parking's terrible. We know and we're sorry. How many of you drive the same way to work every day and park in the same parking spot at work every day? Yeah, okay, you can lie, that's fine. The other thing that I want you to watch out for as you're observing and understanding people better is negative space. Look for the things that don't appear. The things that don't show up when they do these things, the things that they don't say. Those are the gaps that you're looking for. Very often when we're trying to compromise systems and technologies, you look for the thing that the engineer did not think of. What did they not secure? Is it some integer that they didn't put a limit on the size for and you can shove something into the memory? The same sorts of things apply to the human mind. One of the great tools for social engineering is open source intelligence. How many of you have used a tool to gather open source intelligence? Okay, how many of you have used Facebook? You can all raise your hands, I know that it's true. Those kinds of things are used to gather information about you, mostly by companies, but also by social engineers like me. I'd like to show one video clip here that definitely does not have a Hacker's Challenge code in it. You ready?
Never understood why people put all their information on those sites. Used to make our job a lot easier in the CIA.
Of course, that's why I created them.
You're telling me you invented online networking, Finch?
The machine needed more information. People's social graph, their associations. The government had been trying to figure it out for years. Turns out most people were happy to volunteer it. Business wound up being quite profitable, too.
Got it. Do I have to play it again? Nobody caught it? Nope. You ready? Let's play it again.
Never understood why people put all their information on those sites. Used to make our job a lot easier in the CIA.
Of course, that's why I created them.
You're telling me you invented online networking, Finch?
The machine needed more information. People's social graph, their associations. The government had been trying to figure it out for years. Turns out most people were happy to volunteer it. Business wound up being quite profitable, too.
All right, surely somebody caught it by now. I didn't say it. It was not in my talk. All right, next, focus. Redirecting people's focus or knowing where their focus is going to be is key to social engineering. You want to be able to know where their focus is going to be. You want to be able to put their focus on things that they might not normally do so. And this is kind of akin to magic tricks. How many of you have seen a magic trick? Okay, some people still awake. That's great. Well, let's show another video about focus.
Our weapons won't fire, sir.
Our shields are down. We're losing power. Someone in just manually reset our systems.
What do you mean, someone? Who?
All right, so what was he concerned about? That's the answer. He was concerned about who did the action. How many of you at your day jobs have this problem where a problem happens and people run around and they care way more about who did something or who's responsible than fixing the problem? I don't know about you, but if I were in this case and I were running a giant starship full of like giant guns and I want to take out my enemy, I'd probably care a whole lot less about who did whatever broke stuff and way more about how do I get this back online and destroy my enemy. Just saying. Also, preconceptions, anything that you bring to the table that you think you know, that's definitely exploitable. The heuristics that we use as humans every day to not go crazy, they help us to make decisions fast. They help us to make decisions in easier ways without weighing all of the details. But if you can slide something in the middle of that, or get someone to have a preconception that might not be true, that can help you as well. Ready for another video?
can't kill her.
My dear child, that is not the god killer. Ah.
Did everybody get that? Great. Okay. Next is the environment or the occasion that you use for your social engineering. Social engineering is often very context sensitive. Being able to know what the context of something is and how to use it. I used social engineering in a talk, a keynote at SAINTCON 2 years ago, and made my talk Halloween themed because October was the month of Halloween. That's not the case today. I don't think it is. Maybe it is. But it's still Halloween in October. Thank you. Glad we got that cleared up. Yeah, so understanding what holidays are coming up, what people are going through, whether or not someone just ordered something from Amazon. Good ideas to have in your bag of tricks for social engineering. Let's do another video.
Marriage. Marriage is what brings us together. Marriage, that blessed arrangement.
I actually heard people saying that one out loud with it. That's great. The social engineering here is working better than I thought. Thank you, those of you who are working out. I appreciate it. So, for those of you who have put all 4 pieces together of the things that are not in my talk, those were your clues. I don't think there are going to be any more. If you have to leave, you can do that. Also, if you don't care about what I'm saying, you can leave. Now I want to talk about emotion. Thank you. Social engineering, I believe, is about emotion. I've talked a lot in the past about the different things that motivate people and techniques and ideas and ways to engineer certain situations, but what it really all comes down to is emotion. So I want to talk about a bunch of different emotions that make you do things. The first one I want to talk about is greed. We all feel it, and I know that you probably think that you don't, or you probably see greed as only a negative emotion. I don't necessarily think that's true. Wanting things is not inherently bad, although it certainly can be. Here at the conference this year, how many of you have acquired mini badges? How many of you want more? Okay. Maybe come see me after and I can help you with that. I also had this same problem here at the conference. There were many badges here and I wanted to collect them all. I felt like I was doing the whole Pokemon thing. Greed is a feeling that we have when we want something, and when you want something, you generally are willing to do different things to get it. Sometimes that's good. That probably means that you go to work because you want to earn money to provide for yourself and your families. And that's okay, but when that greed turns into something that can be exploited, that might not be okay. Fear. How many of you, when you're driving down the road and you see a law enforcement vehicle, you check your speedometer or slow down? Okay, everyone raise your hands like in silence or in your mind, right? Of course you do. Why? Because there's that authority figure out there that can change your life. And there's a little bit of fear there that you might get pulled over, or you might have like a tail light out and you don't know. That fear is there. Anxiety and anticipation. My favorite example for this, when I was a kid, Christmas. My parents would talk up Christmas all the time. It was great. We would get presents, and you know, the age-old rule of they're all wrapped, they're under the Christmas tree, you can't open them until Christmas morning. How many of you got in trouble for breaking that rule? Yeah, a lot of you, right? Except for maybe the good ones. We all kind of did that because that anxiety and anticipation burns within you. That emotion makes you commit sometimes poor judgment. Hope. When you hope for something to be better or get better, you do different things. We do this to improve our community. A lot of you are here today in hopes of learning something new, and I don't just mean at my talk, although I hope that's also true, but here at SAINTCON, you hope to improve your skills, to be more marketable, to be able to secure your networks or your computers in a better way. It motivated you to come here. That's great. Contentment, this one is kind of the laissez-faire attitude of if everything's okay, lots of things slide. We feel this all the time. If I'm comfortable and content, I will not be as upset about certain things and probably not look into certain things. In the talk just recently that we had by Adam Murray, he talked about the victims of his triangle scam and how a lot of those people don't realize that they've been scammed out of some money, and they don't check their credit card statements for every little thing because they're just okay with the way things are, and the FBI contacts them later and let them know that some things were stolen from them and they're excited to get it, but they wouldn't have ever complained because they were just content. Opposite of contentment, of course, apathy, when you just don't care. I often have the experience when I'm going to, say, a retail establishment and there's a very apathetic employee there who really doesn't care about their job or following the rules. And if you make a well-worded complaint, these individuals will say, well, the rule is for me to not help you with that, but I'm going to help you with that today because I just don't care, or I think that's wrong, or the policy's broken. You've probably all had that kind of experience. When someone doesn't care, they'll do different things, even break the rules. Pride. This one's a big motivator for a lot of people. It's a great motivator for me. And I think this pride also takes the form of personal integrity. One of the best ways for my kids to social engineer me on a consistent basis is to say, Dad, you promised. And I take pride in saying I'm going to do what I promised to do, especially with my children. Not doing that has some negative consequences that I'd rather not engage in. And so as a result, when I promise my kids, I will read you 2 stories for bedtime tonight, you can bet that when bedtime rolls around, Dad, you promised 2 bedtime stories, and guess who reads 2 bedtime stories? Me. Every time. Charity and sympathy. I, at my home, have regular visits from children and young people in my community who are doing fundraisers for their school or their band camp or their dance camp or all kinds of other things. And they come to my door and they've got, wares to peddle. They've got things that they'd like to sell to me. But that's not what they say. No one comes up to me and says, hi, I'm, Stephen or whatever, I'm Jocelyn. I would like to sell you the worst popcorn you've ever tasted. No one says that. No one says, hey, would you like some terrible pizza that we can ship to your home, or we'll give you some coupons for that? What do they say? What they say is, I'm trying to earn money for my band camp, and I want to know if you want to contribute to that. The reward for doing so is a hamburger and fries, or whatever, right? And as a normal, feeling person, you think, hey, I want to be charitable and help this person go to band camp. When I went to band camp, it was great. I had a great time. I learned so much about trumpets and things. When you feel charity or sympathy, when you identify with someone, you're far more willing to do what they want you to when they ask. Trust. When you trust someone or they trust you, that changes things. Hopefully some of you trust me to tell you some truths here. I don't want to violate that trust. I'd like to tell you some things that I think are important. But the downside to trust is that if you ever exploit that in a negative way, there is no going back. Trust is really hard to rebuild and very easily broken. When you get to the point where you are exploiting trust as a social engineer, you are treating people as objects and as a means to an end. You can do it. I recommend against it. Even when you're trying to do malicious things, it's generally a bad idea. You'd rather probably not want to be noticed than to use trust as a feeling that you are motivating people to do that. Entitlement. This is a big one as well, especially in our modern society. If you pay for something, you want to get what you paid for. And complaining about that happens all the time. If you believe you have a particular right that has been given to you by some sort of document or a constitution or the idea or some sort of social force that you believe you're entitled to something, you will fight to the death to get that thing. It's great, but it can be exploited. Why? If I convince you that you're entitled to something, you'll go to bat for me. I don't even need to. It happens all the time. And it all comes back to this feeling of, I deserve this. And I believe that there are lots of things that we deserve. Being able to figure out whether or not you are being exploited for what you deserve, even if it's something that you actually deserve, is important. And being able to exploit someone for something that they believe that they deserve can be a powerful tool in your repertoire for social engineering. Obligation, this is a big one for me as well, probably a big one for you. This is sometimes the reason we go to work even when we're feeling that apathy. I don't really care about my job, I'm really tired, I don't feel so well, but I really owe this to my employer because I need to be there to finish this project or to complete this objective, to make sure that I'm covering my shift, to make sure the network doesn't fall down. Whenever we feel that obligation, we do crazy things. And sometimes we also do regular, normal things like go to work. When you can give someone a feeling that they are obligated to do that, you can predict the outcome with a large degree of certainty. One of the best ways to gain the feeling of obligation with a particular target is to give that person something in advance, a small token of something. If I give you something later on, you kind of owe me back. This reciprocation that we can engage in as human beings, the quid pro quo, if I helped you with something, you'll help me with something as well. You feel that obligation, and sometimes you don't even know it. We do things all the time because of obligation. Some of you are still sitting in your seats right now because you feel obliged to continue this talk even though you've already decided to not pay attention. A couple of you maybe. You don't need to feel obligated, you can leave. But the power of obligation implies that we will fulfill our duties. And those duties don't necessarily need to be clear or accurate. Sometimes they're not. And when they're not, they can be exploited. When you convince someone that it is their duty to perform an action for you, they are often very likely to do that. Envy. If you see that someone else is enjoying some particular privilege or object or satisfaction, this kind of goes along with greed. If you believe that you are entitled and feel envious of someone else, you will do a lot of things to get that. I've seen lots of people do some interesting things for envy without even knowing it. This also happens a lot on social media, the envy for likes. People to post comments on the things that you put online. How many of you have those conversations? I only got 7 likes for this thing and it was awesome. And he or she got 100 and their thing was totally lame. So next time, I'm going to post something even better. Or I'm going to say something terrible about whatever they posted to say, this is stupid, you should have looked at my thing instead. Happens all the time. Using that as a social engineering tool can pit people against each other, and it can make people do the kinds of things that you would like them to do if crafted very carefully. Shame. When we're ashamed of things, we do awful things usually. Shame is a tool and an emotion that we feel and when properly channeled can actually help us to improve ourselves, but more often than not, it doesn't. More often than not, shame ends up in the case of blaming other people or kind of feeling depressed and angry. Using shame to get people to do things happens all the time on the internet and in real life. There's a name for it. It's called shaming. And there are lots of additives to that shaming thing, but we use that to manipulate other people, even across the world, to say, you're not good enough in this way. You did this in a terrible way. You're a terrible parent. You look terrible. So you should change that. You can use shame to do crazy things, and I would also recommend against using this, but you can also turn shame into a powerful tool for change, helping people to realize that the emotion that they're feeling of shame can be used to change their behavior for the better. For those of you who have had the opportunity to listen to some of the, I guess, TED Talks or other talks by Dr. Brené Brown, great speaker on the subject of shame. If you haven't had the opportunity to hear any of her talks, I highly recommend it. Very talented individual, knows a lot about human emotion, and has great ideas to help us to harness that power to do good and to understand why we sometimes don't do what we should with that. Also, one that I learned about just recently, cathexis. How many of you have heard of catharsis? Kind of a cousin of this. How many of you know what cathexis is? Almost, yeah. So I don't see any hands raised. This is awesome. I'm going to teach you a new word today, cathexis. This is where you invest emotionally or mentally in a particular thing. This is why people go to the gym. You paid the money. I invested in this. Now I've got to go take advantage of it. This is why people who are in, toxic relationships end up staying in these toxic relationships that are damaging themselves and others around them, because they've put so much into it. When you can get someone to feel like they're invested in what's going on, there's so much power in that, to be able to turn that into something useful or evil. So, let's kind of recap the power from emotion. I believe that almost every action we take is driven by emotion, at least in part. There's a little part in your brain called the amygdala that is the center of emotion. And it turns out that this little part of your brain has the master switch. It's crazy that emotion has the master switch, but it does. And if I can get you to feel something, all of the centers that do rational thinking get shut down. Now, that's a crazy thought, but it happens all the time. When you get someone into a frustrated or flustered situation where they're really just angry, or they don't know what to do next, they are very vulnerable. And all they're going to react with is emotion. It's really hard in those scenarios, even as someone who knows social engineering, to take a step back from wherever it is I am and say, let me stop feeling emotional and let me instead be rational about this. How am I going to think about this in a careful and concerted way? Why? Because I'm angry, dang it. I want this thing right now. You need to fix this right now. It's your fault. Who broke that thing? Why is it broken? Not, how do we fix it? All right, so let's close out some story time. For the pushpin experiment, where I had a box of pushpins sitting on my desk in a little plastic container, I opened up the lid and took that pushpin set out and held it in front of people. Can you guess what they did? They took one. Every single person that I held it out to. Why? That's just what you do, right? I had some people who, after doing this, asked, why am I holding this? Right? When you have that natural reaction, someone holds something out to you, you take it. Usually, hopefully, it's like a plate of cookies, right? You take a cookie and thank you, that's great. When someone holds out a push pin to you, will you take it? Chances are very good that you will. And often without even asking the question of, why are you handing this to me? Why is this here? That's not very helpful, but in my particular experiment, survey says, of the 17 people that I went up to, 100% of them, all 17, took it without saying anything and then made comments after. Next story, the do not move this sign on the ductwork. I stuck it in the middle of a hallway, sat there for weeks. Nobody did anything at all. And, you know, I guess when you put it in the middle of a hallway, people will just quickly walk around it. So we decided to up the ante just a little bit and make it a little bit more fun. We stuck it right in front of the CEO's office so that she had to shuffle by it to get into her office every morning. We did it for 3 days, I kid you not, 3 days, and not once did we hear, hey, wait a minute, I'm the management. I didn't say this. Also, why is a piece of ductwork sitting in front of a doorway? Clearly the building is finished. When you appeal to authority like that, people just naturally kind of fear it and don't ask questions. The power to ask questions and challenge things in an appropriate way is really powerful. And when you can circumvent that, you as a social engineer have power over your subjects. Sounded like a royalty thing. That's kind of cool. How many of you want to be royalty? Have power over your subjects? 2 of you. All right. I now knight you or whatever. All right, so having a conversation with Chunk last week over text message. For those of you who don't know, I'm good friends with Chunk. We've known each other for a long time, especially with Saint, and he was recently involved in a terrible car accident, so he's not here. He has limited ability to even interact with other people. When he reached out to me, of course, I felt sympathy. Sympathy for the situation that he's in, and sympathy for the situation that he's in both physically and as someone trying to find someone to fill in on very short notice to give a 4-hour presentation on privacy tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. upstairs. Of course I said yes. And I did it for a lot of reasons. I felt the obligation to make sure that SAINTCON is successful. I felt the obligation and sympathy to help him in his moment of need. And I also had it already prepared. So that was helpful too. But just being in that situation, I was socially engineered, and I knew it was happening, but I did it anyway. All right, now for the final story. When I went to the home improvement store, which shall not be named, and I was there with my buddy. We're getting the sensor for Christmas lights, right? Crazy guy with dogs, 2 giant dogs, holding a store employee hostage. In the middle of his conversation, turns to me and says, you were the one who did it. You shot that guy in a gang fight in Park City. Of course, my reaction, after I, picked my jaw up off the floor, was to say, no, I'm pretty sure that wasn't me. Yeah, it wasn't me. To which he responds, yes, it was you. I saw you. There was blood everywhere. And I thought, man, this is getting intense. The best part is, or the worst part is, this is such a mistake. I invited my best friend to come with me. He turns to face me and says, yeah, it was him. It was that guy. I was there too. I saw him shoot that guy. Now, I don't know about you, but when I'm in a home improvement store that has no name, and I'm accused of murder, and my best friend says that I did it, I'm in that emotional state. I have lost all control of reason. I don't know what to do other than to start screaming and yelling in the middle of a home improvement store. I literally left the home improvement store screaming and yelling, it wasn't me! I didn't do it! I've never shot anybody! I don't even know what to say other than that was crazy, right? And the fact of the matter is, I have been studying social engineering for years. Some weird guy at a home improvement store with dogs holding someone hostage accused me of murder, and I lost it. I just lost it. I had no control. Words were coming out of my mouth, and I didn't even, I had no control. This can happen to you too. Doesn't matter how trained you are, if you lose the handle on your rationality, you fall into the camp of emotion. When your amygdala gets hijacked, all bets are off. You will do crazy things. The best way to combat this is to train yourself for these kinds of situations. Now, how do you train yourself for a guy accusing you of murder in a home improvement store? I don't know. Like, that's just, I can't. Yes? Okay, maybe. We'll all agree from here on out. I've trained all of you. When the guy in the home improvement store says you killed someone, you say, you can't prove it, okay? I've immunized all of you against this thing. Now, you know that that's the way to combat against this, right? The problem with this particular method of engaging in training for this particular topic is that you can never come up with an exhaustive list of scenarios. I can always come up with more scenarios than you can. Always. And when you consider that there are how many hundreds of you in this room right now, when all of you have just been taught this, how many situations can you think up to come social engineer me? Whenever I give these kinds of talks at work or at other conferences or this conference, people come up to me and they're like, hey, that was great. Do you get social engineered? I say yes. Can I social engineer you? Like, what do I need to know to be able to do that? And the answer is practically nothing. Like, I'm not very good at defending against this stuff. And neither are you, candidly. It's really hard. And the reason for that is because when you get emotion involved, all bets are off. When you get in a situation like you're in the home improvement store and someone says something different than what you expected, what do you do? Now, lots of people have spent their lives trying to figure out how to regain control in those situations, and some of you are really talented at that, and I applaud you. But if I can engineer a situation where you feel like you don't have an answer, and that amygdala flares up, and suddenly you're in that emotional state, all bets are off. Anything can happen. So, it is a common vulnerability. All humans have this. We all feel emotions. Unless you are comatose, you feel emotions to some degree or another. When you do, you can use social engineering tactics. That is the key to social engineering. We all do it. We do it to each other. It's part of normal conversation. Some of it is good, some of it is bad. I invite you to decide which side you'd like to be on, and I encourage you to do what you believe is ethically best. Also, when you get to the point in social engineering where you're dreaming about social engineering and you realize that you're social engineering yourself and you're looking in the mirror saying, why am I doing this to myself? I think you know that you're doing a great job at learning social engineering because you're starting to learn, man, I'm doing this to me, and I'm good at it. Wow, I made me do that. I made me get up and go to the gym. I made me go to work. I made me do really important things. Social engineering happens all the time. We all do it. Please use with caution. Please remember that some of the things that you can do with social engineering are not good. Some of them break the law. You can do that. I recommend that you don't. That's all I have for today. Thank you very much, and I'll take questions later.